Greetings, everybody. Oh, happy Thursday. What a joyous Thursday it is in this curious time, May 7th, 2020. I'm Greg Archer, and you are tuning into the Esalen interview, where we connect with agents of change, swim deep waters, and wonder quite greatly at what's going on in the world and ourselves. Please know that our thoughts and our hearts are with you at this time, Esalen community, sending out the best vibes to you. I'm so excited about today's guest. Very excited. We're so happy to have Esalen faculty Paul Selig here, one of the foremost spiritual channels working today. In his breakthrough works of channeled literature, which include I Am the Word and his most recent book, Beyond the Known Realization, Paul has recorded an extraordinary program for personal and planetary evolution as humankind to its own divine nature. Described as a medium for the living, Paul channels workshops internationally, and all this after serving on the faculty of NYU for over 25 years. He's become one of the most sought-after spiritual influencers of our time. Paul, what a pleasure it is to connect with you. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And we'll be fielding questions. So folks, if you would like to leave a question, I'll be monitoring, and we could dive in, and Paul will happily answer. So Paul, how has this time been for you?
It's been extraordinary. I think it's been extraordinary for everybody. I'm in Maui right now. You can probably hear the nature sounds in the background. There's roosters and things that squawk. So we're going to get interrupted, I think, by nature. But it's been extraordinary. I was living my life in New York, and I went off to do an event in Costa Rica. New York City shut down while I was there, and now I'm here on Maui for the time being. And I'm having, a really interesting experience and a completely unexpected one. And I think the rest of us are all having a completely unexpected experience as well.
Many unexpected experiences, indeed. Yeah, and Maui, full of roosters, full of chickens, if I recall correctly. Well, yeah, I'm really excited to dive in and just swim a bunch of curious currents here with you and ask a bunch of questions. What do you feel that this time is attempting to teach us?
I don't know. And I'm on my first cup of coffee, everybody. And I never know if I'm going to end up channeling. When I do these interviews, sometimes it just happens. The guides that I work with have been, speaking of this, this kind of a time for some years. When they dictated the first book through me, which was called I Am the Word, they said, humanity is at a time of reckoning, and a reckoning is a facing of oneself and all of one's creations. And they've been talking in the last few books, in the last couple of years, about how all of the larger structures that we've been party to, economic structures, governmental structures, religious structures, were actually going to be sort of reclaimed, reknown, and transformed, in these times. They basically said that everything that doesn't have its basis in truth is going to be in shift, in alter, because it's an opportunity for all of us, I think, to reclaim our true identity. This is what they say. We're being invited now to reclaim who and what we truly are. But we can't do much of that if we're, letting some people starve and, letting some people, go uncared for, in this world. So I think it is a reckoning, and I think it's a deep opportunity. That's the best way that I can look at that.
Yeah. Do you also feel when you talk about being more of our authentic selves or living on that higher vibration, is it that we cannot create the change or be living our true authentic selves if we are operating from that lower vibration, or is that place a point of fear or in doubt? Or
Well, the guides have said, the action of fear is to claim more fear. And every choice we make in fear is going to get us more of the same. It's pretty much a guarantee. They do make a distinction between prudence and fear. Prudence is, there are sharks in the water, best not to go swimming, but that's not about fear. That's about caution and, thoughtfulness. When they talk about becoming the true self, which is a big part of their teaching, or aligning to, or evolving as, they're talking about an aspect of us that they say is always present, They say you can't make anything holy, but you can deny everything already is, but you can deny the divinity in anything. What they're supporting us in doing, I suspect, is reclaiming the aspect of us that knows and operates beyond fear. They say that we live in an octave, and they talk about octaves, and they say an octave is a shared construct of reality with its high notes and low notes, and everything is in vibrational accord. So the world that we're co-creating here, the world that we're seeing, is of this octave, and we're actually being invited to lift to the next one. Some people talk about ascension, and that's the term they use. The guides don't use that term very much through me, but they do say that they're supporting us in going up to the next level. And the next level is actually a level that's not bound by fear and is also not bound by, all of the tethers that we've used to moor us to the lower, all the restrictions, all the systems of control. They say that the true self, as you, knows who he is, knows what he is, knows how he serves. It's not about figuring it out. It's not about self help. It's about reclaiming that aspect of self that knows and then moving into an alignment with it to express it in fullness. The guides say that how one serves is how one is most fully expressed as the true self. It's not your career. It's not your title. It's none of those things. It's really your expression. And they say if you're operating at that level of expression as the true self, you're lifting everything that you encounter by nature of being. And, when I teach and the guides do their workshops, I mean, they're very palpable. The energy is very present, and they teach people how to lift, how to lift their field, how to shift everything around them. And it's fairly extraordinary work. And I'm explaining it as best as I can in short clips. But that's how I can answer that, I suppose.
Is a lot of it, do you feel, getting out of our own way and allowing more of
Yeah,
our self to come through?
yeah. I mean, but it's a little bit more. I think about getting rid of the mask, which is the idea of who we are. The idea of who we are is what gets in the way. There's nothing wrong with the personality structure. We all have one. It's useful. It's how we engage with one another, but it's not authentically who we truly are. And they're inviting us, to this real active reclamation of our own divinity, which tends to come at the cost of what we think and the cost of being right and the cost of how things should be. Because the guides I work with say every should you would claim is actually born in something in history. And you really can't operate in the new when you're continually dragging your history into the present moment with you, because your history isn't who you are either. It's just things that you've known yourself through.
That's right. That's things that you've known and how you've known yourself to be. So, for those who are tuning in for maybe the first time or hearing this, what are, I mean, there are myriad ways we can um, untap that within us, that is the true us. But for those of us those who are tuning in, uh, what would you say? How do we get from our head to our heart, or into being more fully?
Well, I'm a channeler. That's my job. I'm not a spiritual teacher. I'm not a guru. I have no desire to be any of those things. I actually sit in a chair, I close my eyes, and I take dictation. And the dictation that comes through me is what happens in the workshops that, happen through me at Esalen. And the books that come through me are really the unedited transcripts of their teachings, of the guides' teachings. And they're all done. The last three books, I think, big chunks of them were done at Esalen in front of a large audience of students who are participating in the experience of the energy. So how one goes from here to there, I think is really, a process of alignment. The guides say everything is in tone. You're in tone as well. They say, you're in a chord, I'm in a chord, we're all in a chord. And they say ACCORD or ACHORD is on a piano with everything that you see. Because you see it, you're in vibrational accord with it. And the level of vibration begins to lift through you as you begin to align to the truth of who you are and begin to let go of the ideas that you probably utilize to, get what you think you should have. So the process of reclamation of the true self has really, in many ways, been their teaching through. It's now, I think there's 7 books out, and the 8th is coming out in a few months. And I know that there's supposed to be a ninth because I don't know how it's going to get channeled because I like doing these things in front of groups and I can't travel quite now.
Mm.
But that's their teaching. I mean, that's all of the books is how to reclaim that aspect of self and begin to align to it and then support others in doing the same.
Mm. And what is that process like for you when you're in front of groups? Let's talk about that. What is your
Sure.
experience of that?
I wasn't, I was raised an atheist, and I wasn't spiritual in the least, and I wasn't woo-woo in the least. When I was 25, I had a couple of experiences that began to open me up spiritually and psychically, which came at the same time. And I had to grapple with that, but I actually studied a form of energy healing to get a context for this stuff that I was beginning to experience. And I was volunteering at a center for people who were mostly, living with AIDS and at those days dying because there was no treatment or cure. And I was doing energy work there. I was trying to, I was volunteering at a center, and I started to hear for the people that I was working with. So if I had my hands on somebody and I heard the name Bruce, I'd learn to say, "Who's Bruce?" And they'd say, "My lover, my father, my son, my dog." And as I kept getting confirmation, I began to trust the information that I was beginning to access. So for me, all of this stuff has been experiential. And I led a group that met in my apartment for 18 years very quietly. I was in the faculty of NYU. I wasn't looking to be known as a channeler. And the process now is pretty much the same as it's always been. It's just more refined. I sit in a chair, I close my eyes. I like to work with a prayer protection because it sets a field that I'm comfortable working in. And I'll hear one phrase repeated and usually incessantly. And I'll keep hearing it until I give it voice. And the moment I give that phrase voice, and it may be like, "You all need to know," or, "On this day we wish to teach," whatever it is, if I give voice to those first few words, everything comes pouring out right behind it and continues. So I'm just trying to keep up with dictation. That's my job. I actually, when I'm channeling, I refer to it as being a stenographer. I don't think it's a way of being in service. It's a quirky ability or skill set. It's not one that I aspired to. It's actually probably the last thing I would have asked for. I didn't even really believe in channeling, to be honest with you.
Right.
I think I'd read half a Seth book when I was a grad student and thought, well, that's interesting, but put it aside. Um, so the process is of being in this energy, and I'm primarily a clairaudient. So I'm hearing and repeating. And because I hear in phrases, I whisper the words and repeat them. I'm really just trying to keep up. If you can imagine reading 1,000 fortune cookies, one after the other, that's my experience. I'm not experiencing the entirety of the lecture. I'm experiencing the phrases. And then it's not until the students can comprehend the entire thing. I often don't fully get it until I see it transcribed. And then I see, how seamless a dictation it actually was. So that's my experience of the channeling. The other thing that I do when I work, they call me a medium for the living, and I don't understand how this works, but I have this odd ability to step into people and become them. So if you're estranged from your sister and you give me your sister's name, I can step into her. I may begin to resemble her, and I can sort of broker a conversation in a higher way, what the real issues are that are coming forth, what's asking to be dealt with. It's a little like being a switchboard. So when I'm hearing the guides, I'm just tuned into I'm plugged into them. And when I'm reading for people, I'm plugged into them, in a different, more practical way. Channeling requires no interpretation whatsoever. It's just dictation. Reading, which is a different skill set, requires some interpretation because I'm feeling the emotions or I'm feeling the physical pain and I have to understand what it is and then give that voice.
Mm. Well, I would imagine this forever altered your life. There you are, and this shifted, and then you're suddenly in this experience, and then the years go by, and now many people ask you lots of questions and turn to you.
Well, I mean, hopefully they're turning to the guides. I'm probably have as much information, as much challenge getting through life as anybody else. Um, it has changed everything, but I have to say I'm fortunate in that it was gradual. The initial awakening came at a time I was 25. I was a year out of Yale. I just got out of grad school. I was a playwright. I was having my work produced in New York and London, and I was excited about all this stuff. But I really hit a wall. I got everything that I thought I was supposed to have or want, and none of it made me feel good or better. And it was really out of, sheer necessity, not because I thought it would be nice to get spiritual, that I began to look for something more. I was, a self-destructive partying kid. So my emergence into a spiritual life coincided with a lot of other things. A lot of my friends were dying all around me. Um, I wasn't drinking. I had known myself as a hard partying kid. And suddenly I was in a world where maybe there was something you might call God or some energy or some whatever you wanted to call it. There was more. And I knew there was more because I've had a couple of experiences with it that were shocking to me. I mean, literally shocking. I started praying for the first time in my life when I was 25. And I was not somebody he would think would do that, but I did. And I actually heard a voice telling me to get my act together and how to do it. It floored me. It was the first voice, and I listened to it. So that was the beginning of the change. I'm grateful that everything else sort of happened slowly. I really was apprenticed in many ways in this work for a good 18, 20 years before people even knew who I was, before the book started coming. And I'm glad about that. I think had I shown up fully formed, you know, doing this stuff, and I was doing this stuff and very quietly. If I was doing it on a larger stage, I wouldn't have been able to handle it. I learned to show up for this work often in spite of myself and my own resistance to some of what comes through me. But the energy is very palpable. Everybody can feel it when it happens. And, I've come to accept that no matter how articulate I might be as a man, I'm not capable of closing my eyes and dictating 8 books that don't need any editing. It's just not possible, you know. And so I trust this strange process, and I'm grateful that people are being helped. It's actually because of Esalen that I have a public life. I was really hiding, and I wasn't until I was invited to a CTR conference at Esalen to channel before some scholars and some scientists, and I was scared out of my mind. But that was the invitation, and I showed up for it. That everything changed. Mitch Horowitz, who was at that conference as
Right.
well, um, took the manuscript of my first book, which had just been printed at Kinko's, typed and printed the day before I got on the plane, and it was actually published. Mitch was a publisher, and it was published within months by Penguin, thanks to him. And thanks to, the Murphys, Michael and Dulcie, I was invited to teach. And I hear they hadn't had a channeler at Esalen since the 70s. There was a very well known one, I think, working at the time, but there was some resistance to bringing them back, and they did. And it's been a wonderful home for the work that comes through me ever since. I'm very grateful to it.
Yeah, I mean, talk about a shift. And yeah, in CTR, the Center for Theory and Research, for those who don't know. Somebody does have a question. Shall I ask? Yeah. A question for the guides about the heart's desire. What is
Mm.
the best way to align our heart's desire and feel the momentum of this path in the moment more consistently? And that comes from Matt.
Well, the first thing is that's a question for the guides, and I'm on my first cup of coffee, so I'm probably not going to channel the answer. But actually, there is a meditation on your heart's desire at the very end of the Book of Freedom, which is fairly extraordinary. And that was actually done at Esalen, where the guides actually work with people to move into the heart center and reclaim what that truly is. So that's where I would direct people to go to the book, not to me right now, because I wouldn't remember the instructions. So I'm going to ask and see if I can hear anything this morning. But I will say that if I channel, I whisper the words and repeat them. So it's this clumsy, crazy process. They're saying how you align to the how you plan the heart's desires to align to the possibility that it can be done, that it can be known. Right? The possibility is what's required. It's not innate knowing. If it's not in your innate knowing, it is still present. It is still present. There must be access through potential, but must be access through potential. I have the right to know. I have the right to know. I have the right to see. I have the right to see. I have the right to behold. I have the right to behold the true self, the true self who knows what she wishes, who knows what she wishes, who knows what he's come for, who knows what he has come for. If you do this, you go to another, and you go into the agreement with it, you may know what it is, you may know what it is, and indeed how to act upon it, and indeed how to act upon it, period. So that's their answer.
Matt, that is their answer.
There you go.
I believe Matt says thank you. He does say thank you.
Mhm.
Another question from Joseph, and thank you for that, Paul. Paul, in your first book, I Am the Word, in the chapter Boulders, the guides mention the topic of demons in passing and then never return to the topic.
Yeah. I mean, it may be my resistance to talking about that stuff. It's not my favorite topic. If I recall, what they talk about it as a creation, something that hangs out in the energetic field that is sort of becomes independent. It's almost like a hard thought or a hard idea that sort of claims its own identity through us. And that's how I understand them. But it's not part of their teaching. They actually don't talk about angels either. That's really not their schemata. Um, but yeah, I think in that they talk about them as, these things that seem to sort of operate in consort with us that are just not who we truly are. But that's the extent of all I recall about it.
Got it. All right, Joseph. And folks, if you have any other questions, just jot them down. I'm monitoring this. I think you said in another interview that nothing is not the divine,
Yeah.
and that you were sort of challenged by that truth when that came to you. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
I still am. I mean, the guides say, God, you can't. I said it earlier. They said, you can't make anything holy. It already is, but you can deny the divinity in anything and everything, and we often do. And they actually say the only real challenge we face is what they call the denial of the divine. The guides teach the kingdom, and they say the kingdom is the awareness of the inherent divine in all manifestation. So it's part of a very simple and much larger teaching. They say what you put in darkness or who you put in darkness calls you to that darkness. They say you can't lift the evil man to what they call the upper room, which is a higher level of vibration, because you have made him evil. So unless you re-know the man as of source and of divinity, which is a re-knowing or a re-seeing beyond how one presents, what one does, and the morality or the ideas that we wish to apply on that person, we can't actually re-know them in a higher way. So I found that it's true. There's this meditation in the Book of Mastery that I really liked, and they said, imagine you're walking up a mountain and there's a cave, and you walk into the cave, and in that cave is the one person you never want to see again as long as you live, and your assignment now is to walk that person out of the cave. And they say, who you put in darkness again calls you to that darkness. So it's not so much about letting them off the hook or forgiving them in a way that makes what they did okay, but it is about the release of them so that you can be free, and I do understand this teaching, and it is challenging. I see a lot of things right now that I don't like in the world and I wish were different. But I'm also deciding what should be based on my reference points of how I would like things to be. The should is always based on historical data. So yeah, I mean, it's an old 12-step concept, and I believe it fully. And they say, God is all things or God is nothing. What do you want? Which one do you want? You don't get to cherry pick in this stuff. They say that's the hypocrisy of most religions. You get to do this, and you're going to, burn in whatever hell you believe in. And it's a teaching of separation. And this is not a teaching of separation. It's a teaching, finally, of unity.
Mm. Wow, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. Yeah, you don't get to cherry pick, really, right? Another question from Sharon. Does Paul have a daily practice based on his guides' teachings?
I have many that they've given me and almost none that I actually do, as a matter of fact.
So
And
why is it?
because I don't remember it. I mean, this is really that the hard part. I've done these workshops, and at the end of the workshop, they may say to everybody, it would be very helpful if you all took 10 minutes and did this, or this. And then I go to, Dustin, who works with me, and he's videotaping the workshops. And I said, "What did they tell me to do?" He said, "I don't know. I wasn't listening." So it sort of disappears. And unless it winds up in the transcript, because it's all sent off and transcribed, I often don't find it unless I'm going to go through the videotapes. Um, but yeah, they do have these things. They're in some of the books. They have some practices that are supportive for all of us, but they're actually not very big on rules. There isn't, you need to do this every 20 days, every 20 days, every 20 minutes every day. I don't hear that really from the guides very much.
I like that. There's wiggle room. That's perfect.
Well, it's also people like that, they want the how-to instructions. Now, the work with the alignments or the attunements, the guides work with these attunements, which they say we're all radios, we're always playing our consciousness. Our consciousness is the station. What they do through the attunements is they're teaching us how to tune our radios to play the higher broadcast, which is always there. And the attunements are a practice to work with them, because until you are able to really align more fully with them, they're going to remain theoretical. And this actually isn't a theoretical teaching. It's really quite practical and often very physical for people when they work with it. I mean, it's, they're inclusive of the body in all of these teachings. I know who I am in truth. I know what I am in truth. I know how I serve in truth is one of their attunements. But the who that is speaking that isn't the personality self, it's the true self. They say the true self knows who it is, knows what it is, and what it is in its embodiment, in the form that one has taken, and how it serves is how one is expressing. And people have said, "Well, how long do we do these attunements?" And the guy would say, "Well, until you know that until you know them, until they're your expression." Like, I walk into a room and I know I'm in a male body, and I know I lost my hair, and all that. So I don't go and I walk in, "Hi, I'm Paul, and I have a beard and hair on the top of my head, and I'm a guy." I just sort of accept that. It's part of my reality. What I don't always know, truthfully, is that I'm a divine being. That's a bigger struggle for me, to sort of claim that part of myself is the truth of who and what I am. But that is what they're teaching.
Well, I mean, it seems to be a lesson that is repeatedly taught. That's
Oh
something
yeah,
to
absolutely.
keep absorbing and reminding ourselves. I have a few more questions from folks here. Thank you for sharing that. I really felt that. Paul, let's see here. This is from Joseph. One of the things I've been struggling with from the guide's teaching is that the divine isn't all things. What makes us as humans different or special from this leaf on the tree, the fish in the sea, etc.?
Well, the guides say that there's one note played in the entire universe, and that one note, or that one tone, is in articulation as all things. So there's finally one energy that manifests as the rock, as the tree, as the ocean, as who and what we are. The guides speak of. I mean, I what makes us different, I suppose, is our potential for realization of who and what we are. And I will say, I think my dog Lily knows who she is, and I think the tree outside the window is not trying to be itself; it is itself. I think we're the ones who sort of have forgotten who and what we truly are, and are seeking to reclaim that. The guides speak in their teachings, and in a lot of the books they use the term Christ or monad or true self or eternal self, and they've defined it, because it's not a religious teaching, but they say that Christ is the aspect of the Creator seeking to be realized in material form as who and what we are. It's the seed of the divine that seeks to grow and flower and express as and through us, and is all things. So, in terms of how we're different, I don't know. They haven't gotten into that. Let me ask, because now I'm curious. Would like to answer this. They're saying we would like to answer this. The divine self as self. The divine self as self is re-identified in a pluralized state as it grows beyond the idea of separation, as it grows beyond the idea of separation. The tree outside, the sky itself, while of God are not seeking rearticulation, are not seeking rearticulation. It happens through them. It happens through them as the vibration of all things is lifted, as the vibration of all things is lifted, because you are creators, and you have the ability to change, and you have the ability to change the idea of who you are, and then lift the world in accordance with you, and then lift the world in accordance with you, the realization of love, the realization of a true self, while an individualized act. While an individualized act is also part of a pluralized awakening that is in occurrence now, that is in occurrence now. Again, the true self knows who it is. Again, the true self knows who it is. The tree does as well. The tree does as well. It doesn't struggle with its complexes. Nor does it deny the divine, nor does it deny the divine. It knows itself as of source. It knows itself as of source. You are the ones who claim separation. You are the ones who have claimed separation, identify through it, and identify through it, period. Period.
Wow. I also love that there's a period there, as a person who
Well,
writes. It's awesome.
well, it helps me because that's when I know they're going to shut up.
Right.
That's the end of the thought. They'll often say period, period, period. But, yeah, I mean, or they'll say stop now, please, when they're done.
Right. Do you feel a sense of kinship with the guides? Do you feel that it's a friendship? I mean, what is that relationship like for you?
It's odd. There's the primary guide that I work with. I've seen a couple of times in meditation and under hypnosis. It's been fascinating for me because I'm not primarily visual in this work. It's more auditory and physical, but it's very physical. When I channel, I've been told that my eyes turn very pale blue, and I've got dark hazel eyes. It's nothing I've seen, but it's been reported by most people who come and work directly with the guides face to face. So it's interesting. I feel at times that I'm like the person sitting in the front row of the class with his hand up and challenging the teachings because I have to. There's all these books out with my name on the cover that I didn't actually write. And while I don't feel, and I'm not the author of the books, I feel some level of responsibility to the content, only in that, I wouldn't want people to be harmed or misled by anything that would ever come through me. And I'm pretty clear about that. So if the guides teach something that I'm challenged by, I have been known to say, hey, wait a minute. And the books, it appears as, Paul has a question. And then they'll take the question and then they'll usually answer it in the body of the text. So, I mean, they're my teachers. I don't know all the time that their investment is my personal happiness or my personal desires. I think, I have a level of facility that allows for this to happen through me. And that's how it happens. In some ways, I suppose I'm the stenographer. I also feel that at a certain level, I'm of them and distinct from them at the same time. But I also understand that this is probably a much older relationship than this, that this is something that I've been sort of party to, prior to this life, if you believe in those things, I do. But it's a challenging relationship, truthfully, and often challenging because I just show up, often in spite of myself. And every time I do this, even just now, it's like, you stand on the diving board and you get ready to jump and you just hope that there's water in the pool because I don't know what's going to happen. And every time I sit down to do a book, and, the books, the rule is I can't go back and change things. There might be 3 words corrected in a whole manuscript of, 300 pages. And that's because I stumbled over the word and mispronounced it. In a recent lecture, the transcriptionist said, this word presence doesn't make sense, but the real word was prescience, but it came out presence. But when it was under the prescience was clearly, the indicated word. But that's about the level of change. It's usually, a vowel, that was softened too much, or a pluralization that wasn't intended. That's it.
Mhm. Does this process take a lot of energy from your body, or does it invigorate you? I'm sure you've been asked that question
Yeah,
several
it depends. It really depends. If I'm working, and there's a lot of resistance to what's coming through me, it can be a bit draining. Um, but it's arduous physically. I mean, it does take energy. It's a physical act. But I also have been known to channel for 5 hours in a day at places like Esalen. And most people that I know who do this might channel for 30 minutes, and that would be it. But when the guides are doing books, they're going to lecture, 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 because that's how the books take no more than 30 days of lectures, to make the whole book, and then it's just done. So, though that's arduous, I love working at Esalen because you have wonderful food and you can go sit in a tub, or go look at the ocean and replenish. Um, so but I don't complain about it. I mean, it's part of the work.
Yeah, yeah. Whew. Elena says, "Hi, Paul. Do the guides have any advice or messages for these challenging times?"
They've been talking about it a lot. I was in Costa Rica at a retreat when everything started to shut down, and there's actually a couple of videos that are up on YouTube um, from that period that talk to this if anybody's interested. I'm going to ask only one thing. Only one thing. Don't agree to fear. Don't agree to fear. Understand the opportunity here to re-know who and what you are, and how the world is made, and how the world is made. Much of what you have agreed to was agreed to in fear, was agreed to in fear, or agreement to deny the true self, or an agreement to deny the true self. This is in fact an opening. This is in fact an opening, a great opening, a great opening, if it is taken as such. If it is taken as such, deny the divine yourself, deny the divine in yourself, deny it all, and you deny it in all, deny it in another, deny it in another, you deny it in yourself, you deny it in yourself. Open to the possibility, maybe renowned, that you may be reknown, reclaimed, resung, reclaimed, resung in a higher way, and be present with transformation, and be present for the transformation, and indeed will come, that indeed will come, period. And you're saying, period.
Mm, mm. Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you. Woo. Just taking that in. Takes a moment to just let that kind of sink in.
Mhm.
Um, so, Elena, thank you for asking the question. Folks, if you have any other questions, we have about maybe a little less than 10 minutes here. But, Paul, I'm curious, what do you do for fun?
Well, right now I'm on Maui, so when I can get into the ocean, I'm really happy because the beaches are open and they're pretty solitary here. So that's been nice. I have a dog that I hang out with when I'm in New York, who I miss. Um, it's funny. This used to be my hobby. When I had this group that met in my apartment every week, it was my hobby. Now it's my work. So I think I have to find another hobby. If I'm going to find a balanced life. But that's it. I'm not a partier. I'm actually quite shy, which makes some things harder for me than others. You can invite me to the party, but I'll hang out in the back of the room if I come. I'm a good host. I'm a rotten guest. Um, so yeah, I'm still learning what's fun. I'm using some of this time that I have alone for that kind of reflection.
It's beautiful. And on Maui, of all places, it's just a very powerful place, I felt, when I was there for quite some time. What makes you laugh?
Oh, a lot. I laugh at myself a lot. Um, I'm pleased often by the goodness of other people. I've been very moved by that in these times. Actually, I've been cared for well, in this transition. But I've got a really dark sense of humor, and I always have. And I enjoy that, and I love being made to laugh, and my favorite times are actually when I'm laughing. So I'll
We
leave it.
love laughter. Laughter is good. Let's see. We have one more question, and then I think we'll wrap up a little bit here. But let's see. Translating. Pardon me, folks, while I go back. I think the question is translating the I am statements into another language.
Hmm.
Is intention good enough?
I hear yes. I hear yes. I just heard that the book that's coming out in August is going to come out in French soon, so that they're being worked with in other languages. I was surprised. There's a shaman who I know who was bringing the books with him to ceremonies in, I don't know, the jungle someplace, because I started hearing about people who found my book in the Amazon, going, what's the book in the Amazon? But he's a Spanish speaker, and he was working with all of the claims in Spanish and was clairvoyant, so he was sort of watching everything morph, as he was working, with them. So I'm assuming they're just as effective. I think the intent is enormously important.
Beautiful. That was from Andrea.
Hmm.
Andre. Well, a few more questions for you, Paul. And again, thank you for being here on this first Thursday in May. Um, you may have answered some of this, but what brings you a real sense of wonder and awe?
I mean, the work that I do can and often does. It's not that I've become jaded, but I've become very used to this, and I'm used to working with energy, and I'm used to the sort of the heightened experience that come. And I don't think the heightened experiences are the point of the work, but I can feel that kind of wonder, in the presence of some of this and the transformations that I see. But I'm kind of easy, I can be, blown away by a wonderful afternoon. It's not, I don't have a criteria for wonder. It comes when it comes, and I react to it as I do. I don't know what it's going to be.
It's lovely. Lovely. How has this path helped you expand your own human potential?
You know, I'm, I mean, I can step into people I've never met and begin to resemble them and, be filmed doing it and have the other person be filmed in some other city. And you can sort of see the manifestation. It's fascinating stuff. I didn't come in doing this. This happened as a result of doing the work that I do, as far as I can tell. So, how I'm wired seems to be extremely different than how I used to be, unless I was wired for this and I was just so busy lowering my red vibration all the time or denying it that I didn't know it. But yeah, my whole life has changed from this in some ways, in fabulous ways, in some ways, in challenging ways. I still worry far too much. I still complain about being single. I complain about this and that. I mean, ask people who know me. I like to complain. It's not my best asset. And I don't pretend to be anything other than I am, and I don't pretend to be farther illumined than I am. But when I'm working, I get to feel what that's like because the guides are much wiser than I experience myself as, and I can become party to a kind of wisdom that does change me and does support me in making very different kinds of choices that I might have otherwise.
Hmm. It's good to hear. It's good to hear. I think we have one more question from somebody out there, and then we'll wrap it up for today. Um, may have answered this a little bit. Uh, what what we need to focus on during these challenging times, but the question is, what comes next after this pandemic, after these challenging times?
I don't know that I think that what we've begun will be going on for some time. And I don't know that that's the pandemic, but I've heard this is the beginning of a series of great changes. So I've heard, I think that there's great potential here, should we choose to take it. And how we choose to take it is really going to mean a lot about how we experience ourselves in the coming years. But I don't think that this is necessarily a quick experience. And I'm not speaking about the virus. I'm speaking more about, what's been initiated here. And I think, a lot is changing, and I think, we can rise to it if we're willing to do it. It's not about blaming people. It's not about fearing things. It's about, I hope, truthfully, reclaiming our awareness of, the worthiness of every human being, and just to move out of this polarization and separation that I think has been, killing us.
Mm,
So that's how I can answer that right now. You can ask me again another time, and I might have a different one. Okay.
right. Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, one last question for you. What's the most interesting thing you've been learning about yourself lately?
But I can live with a lot of what I didn't know. But I can live with that a lot. I spent 2.5 weeks in a tiny house with a hot plate, and I have to say I was enormously peaceful there. I don't need what I thought, and I think I'm more self-sufficient than I realized. And I think that, in some ways I was prepared for some of this stuff, and I lived through, the AIDS epidemic when I was a young man, and you know, yeah, I mean, so there's stuff, but I really am experiencing myself in very different ways than I would have. I was on the road half the month for the last 5 years, and I've been settled here and quiet here and very, very quiet here and learning from that quiet. So, for me, I'm learning, I think, again, that I'm not who I thought I was, and that I'm not nearly as dependent on the things that I thought I needed to make me who I am. And that's a good thing.
Mm, that is a good thing. It's very beautiful. Paul, thank you so much, really, for your time today, for being present with us here on this beautiful day. It's such a joy to connect with you. And thank you, everyone who tuned in and asked questions and watched. If you go to paulselig.com, you can keep track of Paul and his work. And his upcoming book is coming out this year. Is that
Mhm.
great?
August 6th, Alchemy is the book.
Alchemy. So
Mhm.
look for that. Check out paulselig.com. Stay in touch with us. Stay connected with us. Go to esalen.org/learn or check out our Facebook pages, our YouTube pages, Instagram, and so much more. We care about you. We extend our hearts to you. This is a very curious time, but we are all in this curiously together. Uh, so stay safe, be well. Paul, thank you again, and we will see you next week.